Kalalau Malaki Hawa, Wa Yahushai Bahashem Racha Kudash, and double honors to the elders of Jemas Ruel, blessings unto those men, and blessings and salutations to the Akim out there in truth, pushing this word in all sincerity and in honesty. With that being said, Shalom Israel, Brakta. Today's lesson, the upgrade of the Carmanians. And here I have an RT.com article that says, Iran has upgraded ballistic missiles top commander. Tehran has also changed its military doctrine to an offensive one after U.S.-Israeli strikes. Major General Abdul Rahim Mousavi has warned. The article continues to further say, Iran has completed a technical upgrade of its ballistic missile arsenal and formally shifted its military doctrine to a more offensive one, the country's armed forces chief of staff has announced. The move comes as the U.S. has deployed a carrier strike group to the region, threatening military action against Tehran. Speaking on Wednesday during a visit to an underground Islamic Revolution Guard Corps, the IRGC missile facility, Major General Abdul Rahim Mousavi stated that by upgrading ballistic missiles in all technical dimensions, Iran has been able to strengthen its deterrent power. And that's fallen right into prophecy. Prophecy is playing out just as the scriptures have said when it comes to the Carmanians, aka the Iranians. The scripture of 2 Esdras 15:30 has said that with great power shall they come. Let's go over to that scripture. Here we have that scripture of 2 Esdras 15:30. Also the Carmanians raging in wrath shall go forth as the wild boars of the wood, and with great power shall they come and join battle with them, and shall waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians. Right, the modern day Assyrian is Esau, Edom. And that land of the Assyrians is talking about America. Those Iranian wild boars of Iran that are known upon the scriptures as the Carmanians shall come with great power. And when it comes to the Iranians of today, they are also known as the Persians. And it is prophesied upon the scripture that they shall come with great power. And that's what the article stated. The article stated that Iran has been able to strengthen its deterrent power. This scripture of 2 Esdras 15:30 has said that the Carmanians shall rage in wrath, and with great power shall they come. Tensions are extremely high due to this current Israeli-US versus Iran war. Once they implement the CHIP of Revelation 13 and 16, that third world war of utter destruction cometh quickly, no holds barred. If Iran was to get attacked or invaded by the West, that will automatically draw out the Russians to war. And when it comes to Russia and the US, they are destined to lock horns with each other. But if the so-called Israeli state was to get attacked by Iran, that will draw out the Americans to war. That's why the scriptures have said that the least of the flock shall draw them out. Right, draw out the Americans to war. Now, when it comes to Iran, they should not be underestimated because they have an enormous arsenal at their disposal. They have very sophisticated and accurate theater ballistic missiles with a range of 1,200 miles and tactical ballistic missiles, those TBMs. And they also possess cruise missiles, unmanned systems, and drones. They possess all sorts of advanced weaponry. That's why the article went on to say that Iran has been able to strengthen its deterrent power by upgrading ballistic missiles in all technical dimensions. Iran's got a lot of weapons, and they are able to make them cheaper. But if Iran was to get attacked or invaded by the West, that will automatically draw out the Russians to war as well. No longer can the smaller nations be bullied because they have officially leveled the playing field. Those countries are tired of the bullying and are now upgrading their arsenal, as in the case of Iran. Also remember that Russia is providing an unprecedented level of military aid and technical support to Iran, so any attack on Iran will definitely draw out the Russians. We are no longer living in the time of peace, but of war. Also, the time approaches when the allies of America shall betray them. But as soon as they implement that CHIP of Revelation 13:16-18, that third world war of utter destruction cometh quickly. 2 Esdras 15:31. And then shall the dragons have the upper hand, remembering their nature, and if they shall turn themselves, conspiring together in great power to persecute them. You see, it's prophesied here that the dragons of Ishmael will have the upper hand. Ishmael, Hebrew word Yashamayala, God listens. But when it comes to the nature of the so-called Arabs, it is that of a wild man. That's why the scripture of Genesis 16:12 says the following, and he will be a wild man, his hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. And this speaks of the so-called Arabs of Ishmael. Now, when it comes to the Ishmaelites, it was Esau Edom that named them by the corporate name of Arab. The military called the Arabs Hajis and Swamis. But the word Arab is from the Hebrew word called Arab, which means mixed. It was the so-called Arabs that started the Crusades against the Israelites, and they also took part in Israelite slavery by building slave ships. And that term Moor, that was also placed on true Israel by the Ishmaelites. But when it comes to the Ishmaelite dragons, they shall persecute the Americans of modern-day Babylon the Great. And when it comes to the U.S., it will help to defend Israel if needed. Here we have the scripture of Jeremiah, verse 49 and verse 20. Therefore hear the counsel of the Lord, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, that he hath taken against Edom, and his purposes that he hath purposed against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their habitations desolate with them. And Esau Edom refers to the wicked of the earth according to the scripture of Malachi 1:4. Teman is known for their wisdom, and that represents Germany today. The Temanites represents the so-called Germans because they are the smartest out of the nation of Edom. But not even the wisdom of Teman can help the nation of Edom on what's to come. The scripture has said, surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. This represents the small hatters today. They shall be the ones to draw out the armies of Babylon the Great, aka America, to that final third world war of utter destruction. So in other words, the least of the flock shall draw them out to that inevitable war, to that inevitable third world war. And when it comes to the small hatters in history, they were responsible for World War I and II. And one thing to remember is that wars are bankers' wars. Bankers' wars are very profitable in the lining up of their pockets. But upon that final third world war that the least of the flock, small hatters, shall bring forth, that will be the end of Edom's reign. That third world war of utter destruction that will eventually come will end all Edomite rulership on earth. When it comes to this scripture of surely the least of the flock shall draw them out, is also found upon the scripture of Jeremiah 50 and verse 45. And as a matter of fact, let's go over to that scripture. Here we have that scripture of Jeremiah 50 and verse 45, which says, "Therefore hear ye the counsel of the Lord, that he hath taken against Babylon, and his purposes that he hath purposed against the land of the Chaldeans. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their habitation desolate with them." The word desolate, that lines up with Jeremiah 51 and 29. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. It's in reference to the small hatters in the land of Israel today. And the so-called Israeli state will be the ones to draw out the Americans to that final showdown, to that final destructive Third World War. So basically, if Iran is attacked, Russia steps in. And if Israel, that Israeli state, gets attacked, America steps in. The least of the flock shall draw them out. And it is the Lord that controls these wars. He is a man of war, according to Exodus 15 and 3. The Lord is a man of war, and therefore he has covered all angles. World War III is inevitable, but it's just as the scripture has said. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. They shall draw out the Americans to war. So it's destined for Russia to lock horns with America. Surely he shall make their habitation desolate with them. That land that the small hats now inhabit and occupy shall be destroyed in that nuclear war, along with modern day Babylon the Great. The only difference is that modern day Babylon shall never rebuild, but the land that the small hats now inhabit shall rebuild to later welcome in the true people of the Lord, Yahweh wa Yahushai. And the scripture of Isaiah 14 and 1 has said, "For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob, and will yet choose Israel, and set them in their own land. And the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob." And those strangers are Israelite foreigners that were scattered into all the nations. But with that being said, Kal Malak Yahweh, Wa Yahushai, Bahashem, Rahak Wadash, and double honors to the elders of GMS Ruel, blessings unto those men, and blessings and salutations to the Akim out there in truth, pushing his word in all sincerity and in honesty. With that being said, Shalom Israel, Barakatah.